Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm here with my mom, Nicole. Hi, Mom.
Hello. Hi, Sarah.
And we are here to talk about, I keep calling them back burners,
I
but
love
this
that.
is, and that's why if you're watching this on YouTube and not listening on Apple Podcasts, you'll see that I have put us in the back burner kitchen here. We have books all over, and we are talking about backlist books. And Mom had a really great idea. Oops, I have my wrong notes pulled up. Hang on. The idea was we are going through books from like 2000, is it 14? We're starting with
Yeah,
all the way up until 2019 or 2020, I think.
I've
So,
mine go to 2019.
okay, cool. So I followed the same suit. And so we're each going to, start with 2014 and share about the books, the back burner books, and the author that we discovered. Well, I'll let you explain a bit more.
Well, these books aren't new at all, but they're definitely worth your time to read. Most people call titles that were published in past years backlist books, but Sarah coined the phrase back burner books, which I like even better. These are books you may have heard of and that could even have been bestsellers back in the day. And you always meant to read them, but you just never got around to it. But
Right.
never fear, it's not too late to take them off the back burner and discover some fantastic authors and amazing books. I've tracked my reading since 2014, and I had such a blast looking back at my lists of books that I read. It was really an eye-opening experience, and because what was apparent was that I would discover an author, read a book, and love it. And then
Right.
I would just dive down a rabbit hole and read every single other title that they had written that I could get my hands on. And like one right after another. I mean, I would just like go for it. And that's all I'd read for months is one author. And one of them was an author named Greg Iles. And I was really taken with him. This was like 2014. And he wrote a series of books called the Penn Cage novels.
Penn
And
Cage, like one word.
Penn is Penn, that's his name, and Cage, his last name. So
Okay.
the main character's name is Penn Cage. And he was a former attorney who gets involved in mysteries in the southern town where he lives.
Got it.
And I read 10 of his books consecutively. I mean, I was
Okay.
just obsessed. Another one was an author named Thomas Perry, who wrote a series of books featuring a Native American woman named Jane Whitefield. And I read 7 of those in a row. And this was just in 2014. So it was
Wow.
just crazy. I would just go down these rabbit holes. And my point is that the books that I'm mentioning today are books that were just fantastic authors and amazing discoveries. And if you haven't read them, this is an opportunity for you to enjoy a great experience of just not only discovering an author, but an author who's written a whole lot of other books.
And I think what's nice as well, so I wanted to make a couple points here. What's nice is that these books are very readily accessible. You can find them on Pango, you can find them at the library, and they're going to be plentiful, or on Libby as well. There shouldn't
Sure.
be a huge wait list to listen to the
Not at
audiobook
all.
or to read the ebook. So the other thing I wanted to mention, and this is also kind of a plug, I have for the podcast a new reading tracker spreadsheet that I created. And
Nice.
so this is something that if you go to our Instagram page, so we'll link the link. We'll have the link in the description. This is a free book tracker. And I know my mom has one that's maybe slightly different, but similar, but maybe more tabs. But this is a Google sheet where you can track your habits. You can have a visual look at your library shelves, because the images are updated on different tabs. You can track different keywords that you select. Like if you're really interested in knowing about, like I love to track my publishers. So I can track how many Tor books I read. You could also track genre, of course. So this is something that's free, and you can download it from the link in the profile. So, but to your point, I love this exercise because it was fascinating to me to go back to 2014, and it was like a little time capsule of like, what was I into? What was and it brought back memories of like, oh, I remember I read this book and blah, blah, where I was and what my mental state was at the time. So that's, for me, is really fun to be able to look back on. Now, I also wanted to mention that we used to read all, like, as you said, we used to find an author we loved and then read every single book by that author. And I don't feel like that's a trend anymore. I did that in the 90s and I did that in the early 2000s, but I don't feel like people do that anymore. Maybe they do, but I know that I don't.
I have
Why
a
do you
theory
think?
on why we did that. 8, 10 years ago, we didn't have all the Instagram, Bookstagram, BookTube, all of
The social media,
this
yeah.
input on ideas of what
Yeah.
new books are coming out. And so we were kind of forced to do our own research and try to, maybe something would capture our attention at the library, and we'd pick up a book and realize, oh, that's a good one, and then go back to the library and get as many other titles as we could by that same author. And nowadays, we're just bombarded by all of these new publications. And there's a lot of hype and a lot of social media bombardment of promos and buzz for these books. And so I think we get distracted by the new and shiny, and we don't pay attention to books that were previously published in years past.
Okay, I would agree with that. I also think that I used to go to the library and just stand there and just see what kind of popped out. Like, that was the way you discovered new books, was just to stand in the stacks and go look. Before I let you start, I just wanted to say one more thing. I had an anxiety dream last night about recording this podcast. I dreamt that you created this super elaborate spreadsheet, like slides, like a slide presentation for all of the authors you're going to mention today. And I was like, Mom, that's so great, but it's a podcast. So, people are mostly going to be listening. They're not going to be able to see it. Anyway.
Right.
Okay. You go ahead and start.
I have not done any such thing.
Okay. All right. You go ahead.
Well, one thing I wanted to say about tracking your reading, if any of our listeners aren't doing that, I recommend you start right away. It's such a wonderful experience to just be aware of how many books do you read in print? How many books are on your Kindle? Do you listen to audiobooks at all? What genres do you read more predominantly? Are you reading 50% romance books? I mean, it's just really interesting to bring these things to your own attention. Not that you need to do anything about them, but just to be aware of what you're doing.
I think
anyway, track your reading. It's good. It's a good thing to do.
I noticed that on the last podcast I did with Ahren, where we talked about fantasy authors.
It's a good one, by the way.
Thank you. It was fun to do, but I realized that all of the books that I recommended, every single protagonist was like a young female. And I realized that maybe I need to read books from perspective of men more. And why am I not doing that? And so I'm more aware that I'm making more of an effort now to pick up a book that has, a male detective or a male protagonist. So
excuse me. Well, another thing is you might want to challenge yourself to read more books that were written by people of color. Or you might want to expose yourself to more LBG TQ books. And, it's just really a good thing to be aware. Are you reading more character-driven books, more plot-driven books?
Yeah.
Where is your taste leading you? And do you want to make any changes, or just be aware of it?
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into our first book. Now, you've already mentioned some of your favorites from 2014. I have one from 2014 as well. that was the year that I discovered Emily St. John Mandel. Station 11 came out that year. At first, I really did not understand, nor did I like this author at all. But I want to revisit this because I've talked about other books that she's done, and I really have enjoyed them. Her writing style is extremely different. It's slow. These are slow burn books, which is perfect for a back burner list. But let me just explain about her writing style. So Emily St. John Mandel's writing style is very lyrical. It's extremely atmospheric, deeply introspective about humanity. She really blends seamlessly literary fiction with speculative elements. For me, speculative and like magical realism those are like the same thing. Often she uses non-linear storytelling, which can be a little bit jarring for people who haven't read her books before, because you're not clear why we are introducing in a different chapter a totally new character who has nothing to do with the character that we just read about in a different time period. However, her prose is really elegant, with a focus on very character-driven narratives, fast-paced action. Well, I mean, fast-paced action, there are parts of it. I wouldn't say the whole book is fast-paced, not at all. These are really slow books. But again, in a good way. I'm not selling this. Okay, she's very good at building quiet tension, crafting emotional depth, exploring themes about survival or memory. And oftentimes her stories do have like a melancholic and dreamlike quality. And the emphasis is usually always on like fate and coincidence, which I like because I think that dives into, or it lends itself to that magical realism, or what do we call it, speculative element. Now, Station 11 itself, if you haven't read it, it's an interesting premise where we've got a post-apocalyptic novel that follows really interconnected lives with several characters before, during, and after a flu pandemic. Again, this was written in 2014, so it's going to hit home a little differently now when you read it. She also, actually, this story really revolves around Arthur Leander. He's a famous actor who dies on stage just before the outbreak. He's a Shakespearean actor. And then the rest of the story is kind of following like this Shakespearean troupe as they are traveling through the countryside to put on their plays and on their performances to different camps now that have been established since the apocalypse. So that is 2014. She has many other books that I recommend, which I've talked about previously in other podcasts. So definitely check her out.
I really enjoyed Station 11. Isn't that the one where a lot of the camps are in abandoned airports?
The camps now are in like abandoned airports or in parking lots of Walmarts. It's very like poke, whatever, you get it. It's very, very melancholic. I mean, this is not, the atmosphere is sad. But anyway, very much a look at humanity.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one too.
Let's jump into 2015.
Okay, 2015 was the year I discovered the Poldark series by Winston Graham. And the first book in this series is called Ross Polkark, A Novel of Cornwall. And it was published all the way back in 1945, if you can believe it. But it's so readable. And Winston Graham wrote 13 books in the Poldark series, 13. And the cast of characters are individuals that you will just absolutely love or hate, but you certainly won't ever forget them. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. And the first book starts with Ross Poldark returning to his native home in Cornwall after fighting for the British in the American Revolutionary War. And when he arrives home, he's quite disappointed to discover that his fiancée, Elizabeth, has decided not to marry him after all, but instead to marry his obnoxious cousin, Francis.
Oh, dear God.
And also, Ross's father has passed away, leaving him the pretty derelict family estate. And so Ross dives into trying to restore the estate to its previous level of prosperity. And I enjoyed every single one of these books. His love interest becomes a woman who is not of his same social class, but of a very much lower social class. And her name is Demelza.
Demelza, okay.
Which I guess is a Cornish woman's name. Anyway, the books have been made into an absolutely outstanding TV series, which is extremely popular. And you may have watched some of the TV episodes, but the books I highly recommend. As a matter of fact, when I finished all 13 books, I bought them all and gave them to my father because I thought he would enjoy them. And he read them too.
Good. Excellent. Okay. So that was your 2015. I'll jump into my 2015. That was the year that the book sensation, The Girl on the Train, came out by Paula Hawkins. That was the year. Yeah. And this book is, I think, really shifted a lot of the thriller genre and really made the unlikable and unreliable narrator trope very popular. Paula Hawkins' writing style is very psychological, as I said, suspenseful, deeply immersive. She crafts unreliable narrators using a first-person perspective. Think like Memento, the movie, where you're getting one person's perspective, but their memory is, of course, a little faulty. I also mentioned in past episodes a Korean horror novel that really takes the same turn with this unreliable narrator. And again, so that's a much more current book, but very popular trope. There's a lot of internal monologue. There's a lot of memory distortion, slow building tension, a lot of themes of trauma, addiction, complexities of human relationships, two people having a conversation and each one comes away from the conversation with a totally different perspective of actually what was said. So it is fascinating stuff. This book in particular, The Girl on the Train, and of course, Paula has many other books now because she is so incredible. The book itself is this psychological thriller that follows Rachel Watson. She's an alcoholic and she becomes obsessed with the lives of this couple who lives in a house that she can see into from the view of her daily train route. And she fixates on them and she thinks that she sees something that is sees a crime. And she starts to investigate this all on her own without anyone needing to or asking her to poke her nose in this. What else? This is also told from perspectives from the couple that she has been fixating on. There's a lot of deception, betrayal, a lot of hidden truths. I mean, this is twisty and page-turny from the first paragraph. Highly recommend. So.
I really related to that book because I used to occasionally take the train from our house in the suburbs up to San Francisco. And I thought it was fascinating to look out the window of the train into the backyards of the houses that were along.
And that's exactly, what this book is doing.
And sometimes you'd see, a lady out in her backyard, pegging up her clothes on her laundry line. And you just would start to think, what are their lives like? But can you imagine thinking that you observed a crime occurring as their train passed a house that you were kind of fixated on?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was very relatable.
Absolutely. It was a great premise.
And you're right. She her style really revolutionized that kind of thriller, psychological suspense type of book. And it became hugely popular. And as a matter of fact, a lot of books that came out after The Girl on the Train, it was so common to see new books compared to it. If you like The Girl on the Train, you're going to love this one. And, sometimes those comparisons were not apt at all, but it certainly became a buzzword. That
also in the titles from 2016 onward, every single book that was a thriller is a girl on a bus, girl on a train, gone girl, all the, girl, unexpected, like whatever. Okay. What's your next one, Mom?
Okay. I'm moving on to 2016.
Mm-hmm.
2016, I read a lot of good books that year. In fact, it was kind of hard to come up with one author that I really wanted to promote, but that was the year I discovered Sarah Waters and her amazing body of work. Her novels often explore themes of identity, sexuality, social class, and particularly through lesbian relationships and the challenges that were posed by societal norms, especially during Victorian times. I mean, you just really had to keep your feelings under wraps in those days. Her works examine gender roles, the complexity of desire and oppression, for sure. And since they're set in Victorian times, as I mentioned, there is an extra level of oppression, particularly that women faced. One of my favorite books of hers is one called Affinity that was published in 1999. And one of our main characters is a woman named Maud, who is a well-to-do, she's fairly high-ranking in Victorian society. And she's decided to distract herself from her kind of boring, mundane, rather sad life by doing charitable works. And so she starts visiting women inmates at Millbank Prison. And she meets a woman who's been incarcerated. The woman is a spiritualist who had a seance go terribly wrong. And someone dies in this woman's seance. And she's been imprisoned and is being blamed for whatever mishap occurred during this seance. And the women began, after many visits, to kind of develop feelings for one another. But the emotional complexity was just fascinating to me. And also Sarah Waters' descriptions of Victorian times are so detailed, so just incredibly realistic. And if you love historical fiction, you could really just dive into Sarah Waters' books. She's written quite a few things, and most of her books, she'll blend Gothic style and psychological suspense, and of course, personal desires. Another book that she wrote that I loved is called The Paying Guests, and that was published in 2014. That book had to do with a mother and her grown daughter who the husband, father, has passed away, leaving them in really dire financial straits, and they're forced to take on boarders. And one of their boarders is a newly married couple. And the daughter of the woman who runs the boarding house becomes obsessed with this couple. And many interesting things transpire as a result. Anyway, I highly recommend Sarah Waters. She's written a couple of her books are The Tipping Point, Fingersmith, not The Tipping Point, Tipping the Velvet. Tipping the Velvet was the title I was trying to think of. Anyway, highly recommend Sarah Waters.
Are her books all standalones, or does she have any series?
No, she does not have a series. All of her books are standalone.
Okay. Well, for me, for 2016, I have a series that I'm going to share. This is by Carleen O'Connor. She came out with the first book in the series. The first book is called Murder in an Irish Village. And these, you could say that these are like cozy mysteries. I guess you could. We're not like sipping tea and in a bookshop having a mystery, unfold. But anyway, Carleen has a very engaging, cozy, very richly atmospheric. You'll notice that is what I love. All of these authors write atmospheric books, blending mystery, humor, and heart. And she brings the charm of a very small town in Ireland to life through vivid descriptions, really witty dialogue, a strong sense of community. Not everybody is likable, but our main character, which I'll talk about in a moment, is an amateur sleuth who eventually wants to join the police force. So she's kind of like, she acts as if she's a policewoman, but she's not quite there yet, which of course gets her into a whole bunch of trouble because her boyfriend is an actual policeman, and he's always reprimanding her for sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. With Carlene, her mysteries have very suspenseful elements. They are still lighthearted and infused with a lot of warmth. And of course, you get the whole Irish village atmosphere. So her first book in the series, Murder in an Irish Village, is in this picturesque town of Kilbane, where 22-year-old Siobhan O'Sullivan runs the family bistro. But she is the eldest of a whole brood of brothers and sisters. Her parents have I think there was a car accident. Her parents have passed. And so Siobhan has taken on responsibility of raising all of her siblings. She does have an older brother, but he had a bit of a crime and drug problem. And so he wasn't able to take on responsibility for the other children in the house. And so she did. And this first book starts with her brother James, who's been trying to clean up his act, but he is accused of a crime. And so Siobhan wants to make sure that she helps clear his name. And there's a lot of small town gossip, long held secrets, unexpected danger, but lots of charm and a lot of cleverly woven whodunit with a lot of Irish culture. So there's tons of books in the series. I really recommend it.
Well, I have to concur with you because I'd forgotten I had started that series years ago, and I really did enjoy it too. I don't know why I abandoned it. Something new and shiny must have popped up and distracted me. But
I especially recommend listening to these books in an audio format, so you get the
nothing
narrator.
like an Irish accent, is there?
Yeah, and all of Siobhan's siblings are all brats and just malicious to her, and you feel so sorry for this poor girl. Okay, that's it for 2016.
All right, well, 2017 was the year that I really read my first fantasy book. I mean, besides The Hobbit and the trilogy of the Story of the Rings, I had never really read any fantasy books, but that was the year I discovered Robin Hobb. Mm-hmm. And Robin Hobb has written a lot of books. And this particular series started out as a trilogy. The Assassin's Apprentice was the first book in the Farseer Trilogy, which came out in 1995. And in that book, we are introduced to Fitz Farseer, who is a royal bastard trained as an assassin in the kingdom of the Six Duchies. And he's been gifted with a magic ability, as many individuals in fantasy books are. And his ability is called the wit and the skill. And as the books go on, we discover what exactly that magical ability consists of and how Fitz can use it.
Wow.
And Fitz navigates court intrigue, loyalty, and betrayal under King Shrewd's orders. And he's trained to be an assassin. His heart's not really in it, but he's trying to do his best to take on the responsibilities of his training. Anyway, the series blends political drama, deep character development, and immersive world building. That's the thing about fantasy books. There's always, you have to get through the world building. And a lot of times I get lost when the author is trying to build this fantasy world.
There's an art to it to do it well.
Well, Robin Hobb does it absolutely brilliantly. And the characters, you feel like you know them. You feel it's so immersive and immediate. And in this particular kingdom that Fitz lives in the castle, there is another character who is called the Fool. And the Fool is pretty fascinating. He's funny, of course, but there's something about him that just seems to be much deeper and
Of
deserving
course.
of more exploration.
The
And
fool is always the wisest character.
as the series goes on, we get to know the Fool very well. In fact, one of the titles in the series is called Fitz and the Fool.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this trilogy is the beginning of, I mean, Robin Hobb just couldn't stop herself. She turned this trilogy into a saga called the Realm of the Elderlings saga. And this saga consists of 16 books.
Oh
And
my
each
gosh.
one of them is a chonker. I am not kidding. They're like 500, 600 pages. And it seems like as the series goes on, the books get even longer.
It's like Harry Potter.
You don't mind because you just don't want to leave these characters in their world. And honestly, if these are the only, I mean, it would take you a long time to get through these 16 books. And I highly recommend them. If those are the only books you read in an entire year, I'd say your time would be well worth it. Well spent.
Love it.
Robin
okay. Hobb. Robin Hobb. So let's jump to 2017.
Yep.
And now this book I discovered in 2017, but it came out the year previously in 2016. But this is I Found You by Lisa Jewell, which I think you read because you recommended it to me. And Lisa Jewell, we should all know her name. She's very popular. And you'll notice now, like here it's 2025, we're getting closer to the point where a lot of these books or authors will be more known to you, I would think, if you've been reading for a while. So Lisa Jewell, her writing style is very suspenseful. I believe she's a British author. All of her books really take place in the UK. Very character driven, emotionally rich is how I would describe these books, blending psychological thriller elements with a deep exploration, again, of human relationships. She has a lot of multi-perspective storytelling, which is great because that, of course, adds to the psychological suspense. Her prose is really immersive and atmospheric, again. She does often feature an unreliable or extremely vulnerable character where their personal trauma adds to the layer of tension that builds throughout the book. And her novels always contain elements of crime, excuse me, mystery. They focus heavily again on emotional depth. And I love her books where we are exploring themes of identity and trust, of like, who am I and who are they and do I trust them? So in I Found You, this is a thriller that blends 3 storylines. Alice is a single mother. She lives in a beautiful little coastal English town. And one day on a walk with her dog on the beach, she finds this mysterious dude just sitting like in the dunes, just watching the waves. And he has no memory of how he got there. We also have a character named Lily, who's a newlywed, and she's searching for her missing husband in London. And then we have a past narrative set 23 years earlier that led up to a very tragic event. And so Alice helps this lost man piece together his identity. And as she does this, she's beginning to realize that perhaps he's a part of this crime that happened 23 years ago. And there's a lot, like the past is really beginning to resurface. Things are connecting in very unexpected ways. So really, this novel starts to unravel the mystery, but it's very gripping. And also we're exploring consequences of past actions. So that is Lisa Jewell.
Now, if you read a Lisa Jewell book, this is an example of an author who's very prolific. I think she comes out with a new book every year.
Yeah.
And if you enjoy her work, oh my gosh, you've got hours of entertainment ahead of you.
She's always a good time.
Recently by her was called The Night She Disappeared. And it's very similar. It has elements that are exactly as you described. This young girl disappears, and there's a weird guy that lives in the house across the street. And everybody says, oh, he's creepy. And, you know, he must know something about it, about this disappearance. And he's a very vulnerable, odd person who is also very observant. And
Yeah.
as the book progresses, you've got some sympathy for him, but he is, he's creepy, but it's deeper. It's a lot deeper than you first imagine. And the characterizations in her books are so well done. They're not cardboard,
Yeah.
characters at all in any way, shape, or form. They seem very real and have a lot of vulnerabilities. So I totally agree with you on Lisa Jewell. She's an author well worth exploring.
How about 2018?
My favorite author discovery in 2018.
Oh, wait, did you do 2017? Did I skip?
I did. That was the Robin Hobb.
Okay. Sorry. Keep
So
going.
2018, my author discovery was an author named Jane Harris. Now, she's not very prolific, but she's got 3 books in her repertoire, all of which I read and enjoyed. 2 of them I gave 5 stars to, and the other one was like 4.5 stars. And her novels are celebrated for their rich historical settings, intricate plots, and deep character development. The first book that I read by her was called The Observations, which was published in 2006.
Yeah.
It's a historical narrative set in 19th century Scotland, and it explores the dynamics between a maid and her mistress. And it was a very, very interesting relationship that these 2 women have, and highly recommend the book. I was totally engrossed by their story. And also that particular book, The Observations, was shortlisted for the Orange Prize. I believe Jane Harris is Welsh, so she's definitely in the UK. Mm-hmm. And her characterizations of 19th century UK were very well done. The second novel was one called Gillespie and I, which was published in 2011. And that delves into the art world of 19th century Glasgow. And it presented a complex tale of friendship and deception. Her latest work was called Sugar Money, published back in 2017. Sadly, she hasn't put anything out since then. But that was based on a true story of slave smuggling in 18th century Caribbean. And it highlighted themes of love and sibling rivalry amidst the horrors of slavery. Wow. But all of her books are just very well written, and any historical fiction buffs, I think, would really enjoy her work.
Lovely. Okay. All right. For 2018, I discovered Andy Weir. He, earlier on, I don't know what year, maybe it was 2016, he had written The Martian, which was a very popular book. Of course, it became a great movie. And I wanted to pick up some of his books. I picked up a couple. The Martian was too scientific for me at the time. I just couldn't really get into it.
Did you ever watch the movie with Matt
Damon?
Oh
yeah, I loved the movie. There's a scene actually that I didn't realize was a blooper that they kept in the movie where Matt Damon is in his little spacesuit and he's got the shield down and he sneezes and all this gross snot is like splattered all over the shield and he's like, oh, that's a problem. So now you can't see, and they kept it into the movie. Anyway, Andy, he's lovely. He has very fast-paced writing style, very witty, but highly technical, blending hard science fiction, but humor and sharp dialogue. So I wouldn't say, we're not in space in the future on a rocket ship and there's aliens that are talking to it. Well, okay. Well, anyway, this is more approachable, realistic space, like space in the distant but near future. I'm not making any sense. His narratives are very meticulously researched. He often incorporates real-world physics and engineering and space science to create these very realistic and immersive settings. But again, always really funny. He wrote a book called Artemis. That's a sci-fi thriller that is set on the first and only city on the moon, and there's like a colony. And it's kind of a mystery crime novel that has to do with like lunar economics and corporate corruption and life-threatening dangers living on the moon. So I liked that, though it's probably not his most famous book. That would still be The Martian. What I do recommend is Project Hail Mary, which you recommended to me as well. And Project Hail Mary follows Ryland Grace. He's a scientist turned school teacher, and he wakes up alone on a spaceship with no memory of how or why he's there. And as his memory gradually returns, he realizes that he is on a very desperate last-ditch mission to save humanity from an impending extinction. There's a lot more to this book. There is another character, though it's mostly just Ryland speaking, but he does make contact with an alien and they form a friendship. So I'll just leave it at that. But I think that is probably his best book. Mom, what did you think about it?
I loved it. It's got the best alien ever.
It really does. The best alien ever. Now, oddly enough, there is a similar book that came out at the same time with the same type of alien, which is interesting. Let me do a little bit of research here. Adam Sandler was actually in the movie adaptation. Adam Sandler movie, it's called Spaceman, and that came out in 2024, and it has extremely similar premise. So interestingly enough, if you like that type of book or genre, after you read Hail Mary, try watching The Spaceman or reading the Spaceman book. So yeah, that was my 2028 experience. Are you ready to jump into 2019?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I totally endorse Andy Weir. I didn't realize he'd written so many other books. I knew.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, about The Martian and Project Hail Mary.
I think Project Hail Mary is also going to be a movie too, but I don't know why it hasn't come out yet. So
that's going to be interesting how they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, 2019. In 2019, I discovered William Kent Kruger, who's a prolific writer. He's mostly known for his Cork O'Connor series about a former sheriff now living in Minnesota. And those books are great. But my absolute favorites of this author are his 3 standalone novels. These showcase his talent for literary fiction with deep emotional and historical resonance. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful books. Ordinary Grace is the first standalone that I'm aware of that he's written. That was published in 2013. And it's a coming-of-age story set in 1961 Minnesota. And we follow 13-year-old Frank Drum as he grapples with tragedy and loss. And it won the Edgar Award for Best First Novel, or Best Novel.
Mm-hmm.
The second standalone book that I've read by William Kent Kruger is This Tender Land, which was published in 2019. And it's an epic Depression era odyssey following 4 orphaned children who escape from an abusive boarding school, and they journey along downriver in search of their home. They're all Native American children, and I guess was the thing back in the day. Native American children would be put in these boarding schools and supposedly re-educated to be not Native American.
Just whitewashed, really. Yeah.
Whitewashed for sure. And they were also treated abominably in many, many cases. And these 4 orphans escape. And I love an Odyssey kind of story, kind of the Huckleberry Finn theme where they're journeying down a river. They meet all kinds of different characters. Some of them are awful. Some of them are helpful. But anyway, there's never a dull moment. And ultimately, we hope these children will find refuge and a new life away from this horrible orphanage situation. His most recent book, William Kent Kruger's most recent book, is The River We Remember, which was published just in 2023. And it was very widely acclaimed and quite well reviewed. And that one was a gripping mystery set in 1958 Minnesota, exploring small town secrets, prejudice, and justice after a wealthy landowner is found murdered. And the wealthy landowner, of course, is an odious person who
Right.
deserved everything that he got.
Right.
And unfortunately, the primary suspect, and this is set right after World War II.
Yeah.
And the primary suspect is a Native American man who has married a Japanese woman and who lives in the town, and everybody hates them and suspects them of this murder, which of course he did not do. And that's not a spoiler. You know who killed the landowner pretty early on. I think you figured it out. But it was all three of those books are wonderful. He's a very descriptive writer. His characters are usually portrayed very sympathetically, the characters that have good character. And you're just rooting for his characters like you just wouldn't believe. His books are really full of heart. And
I was just going to say, it sounds like he writes characters full of heart.
And, those three standalones were my favorites, but his Cork O'Connor mystery series, he's written so many books in that series, and they're very popular as well. But I've only read one of them, and I didn't like it quite as well as I liked his standalone books. So that was 2019.
For me, so was that your last one?
Yes.
Okay, for me, for 2019, I discovered Naomi Novik and her book. She wrote, actually, I read Uprooted first, because at the time, like in 2018 and 2019, I was really into these fairy tale retellings that were dark or slightly gothic. And so I discovered Uprooted, which was a bit of not Jack and the Beanstalk, it was, I'm blanking, doesn't matter, because that's not the book I wanted to talk about. I think I'm trying to think of Sleeping Beauty. There's a little bit of a play there with Uprooted, because there's I
can't help you out because I didn't read that one.
I know, I'm blanking. The
silver in the title.
Yes, so Spinning Silver is the one that I wanted to mention, but Naomi's writing in general is very lyrical, immersive. Lots of folklore, usually lots of fairy tale traditions, lots of intricate and atmospheric worlds, blending historical influences and magical realism with very mythic storytelling. Her prose is very elegant, beautiful, beautiful writing, complex characters, moral dilemmas. What I liked about Spinning Silver was that it was different. It was all about Rumpelstiltskin. And it was a reimagining where it's extremely winter, like dead winter, medieval inspired village. And the story is following the daughter of a struggling Jewish moneylender. And there's, what am I trying to say? There's a political marriage that is also taking place. There's some intrigue there. And Miriam is able to start to take on the skills of being able to maybe not literally create or weave, spin wheat into silver, but she's able to do something very similar. There is also an element of fae and fairies, of course, with this story, and I really recommend it. This book is so chilly. You are wanting to be wrapped up in furs and sit by a fire. This whole book is just dark and wintry. Just fascinating. Naomi has gone on to write more YA books. This is not, and neither was Uprooted, but she writes YA more commonly now. And I haven't been able to get into them. They're typically first-person narratives that I just can't get behind. But hopefully she'll come back and revisit some of these more adult books in the future. So there you go.
Reading Spinning Silver and really enjoying it. And if you're looking for a book that just gives you a wonderful wintry atmosphere, like Sara described. That's a great choice. Really good choice. It's always nice to read a book that is seasonal, I think, and I really enjoy doing that. Reading something spooky in the fall, something wintry and blustery in January and February.
Exactly. So that will kind of wrap up our talk here. I have fallen off of the camera view because my mouse has died, and now I can't control anything on my computer.
Oh,
so
no.
That's fun.
Well, I certainly did enjoy this topic. It was super fun for me. And it was great to look back on my reading tracking for those years, all those years ago, because it showed me that my first love is in reading is finding books that delve into character development. And
Absolutely.
Of course, I love my literary fiction and my historical fiction. And obviously, I really appreciate being able to discover an author who's got a great backlist.
What I think we should do in the future, I'd love to revisit this topic again and do more backlist episodes. But I also wanted to suggest to you, maybe we do an episode on audiobooks exclusively and our favorite narrators.
Okay.
I've recently discovered that Pedro Pascal, who was in, The Mandalorian, and he's a kind of a popular, he's a Colombian actor. He's been doing some great work, as well as my other favorite actress, which is Rosamund Pike, and she does a lot of audiobook narration.
She's done some amazing audio performances.
So anyway, just an idea.
It's a great one.
All right, friends.
Well, forward to the next thing we come up with, and we'll see what that is.
Absolutely. Okay, friends. Thanks for joining us. Mom, always good to chat books with you. Bye.
Bye.